Hi, everyone. Welcome to another presentation by Care to Prevent. This is part one of a series that we are doing this week. And the first part is about LGBTQ allyship. So let's get into it. If I can change slides. So just a disclaimer, we acknowledge that some of the content in this presentation is sensitive and may be difficult. So please feel free to exit the presentation at any time. Care to Prevent, of course, encourages everyone to care for their safety and well-being. Before I start with the purpose, a cross-sectional study was done and conducted by the Trevor Project, which included over 34,000 respondents of LGBTQ youth across the United States. So greater than 50% of LGBTQ in the US say they've experienced discrimination in their personal lives in places like the workplace, housing, and education. Among LGBTQ youth in schools, nearly 60% say they feel unsafe in their schools simply because of their sexual orientation, while almost 45% say they feel unsafe because of their gender expression. 71% of LGBTQ youth report discrimination due to either their sexual orientation or gender identity. So in order to have a positive impact on these statistics, we need to have a spectrum of diverse voices expressing their support for equality and inclusion. And that includes people who are not members of the LGBTQ community. So here's a little outline of what we're going to talk about today. What is an ally? Why be an ally? We're going to assess our personal beliefs and awareness. Talk that talk, so really understanding appropriate linguistics and language, visibility within programs and within yourself as being an ally, how to navigate anti-LGBTQ behavior and language, and more importantly, how we can support and educate the LGBTQ community as well as LGBTQ peers. So what is an ally? An ally is an individual who speaks out and stands up for a person or group that is targeted and discriminated against. They work to end oppression by supporting and advocating for people who are stigmatized, discriminated against, or treated unfairly. An LGBTQ ally would be any person who supports and stands up for the rights of LGBTQ people. Allies have been involved in almost all movements for social change, and allies can make significant contributions to the LGBTQ rights movement. So I just want to add to this that it's important for allies to demonstrate that LGBTQ individuals are not alone as they work to improve the social climate and take a stand in places where it might not be safe for LGBTQ individuals to be visible. So why be an ally? While all individuals are at risk of being bullied, harassed, and assaulted, LGBTQ individuals face particularly hostile environments. Visible support can make a difference in ways that will benefit everyone. So anti-LGBTQ behavior creates a hostile environment and an uncomfortable and unsafe space. Homophobia and transphobia can be used to stigmatize, silence, and target individuals. And of course, allies can assist in fostering a greater sense of safety and inclusion, resulting in a more positive experience. Nonetheless, allyship could also challenge anti-LGBTQ behavior and work proactively to ensure a safer, more inclusive society. Here's a little quote from an article that I read recently from an individual that's running for council in Minneapolis. Without intersectionality, there will be no progress, no forward movement. When we center intersectionality, when we agree that we are not a monolith, that we are multi-layered in thought and identity, then that's when no one is left behind. You know, when I read this article, I wanted to point out that I really thought about, it made me think about the Black trans community. And so Black trans individuals often face specific set of structural, institutional, and personal barriers to accessing basic needs like housing, employment, and safety due to the intersections of their identities. And I just want to point out that this is something that I think is important to be informed about, more specifically protecting and uplifting Black transgender individuals and communities So ways to get involved and offer support will be discussed later in this presentation. Assessing awareness. Be aware of how much space you take up. That is so important. Assess your personal beliefs. The more aware we are of our own biases and their impact on our behavior, the easier it is to ensure that our personal beliefs don't undermine our efforts to support the LGBTQ community. So here are some questions that I pulled up from inclusive LGBTQ curriculum and policies within programs, schools, and ways to really navigate your personal beliefs and self-awareness. So some of the questions were, have you ever laughed or made a joke at the expense of LGBTQ people? Have you ever stood up for an LGBTQ person being harassed? Why or why not? If someone were to come out to you as LGBTQ, what would your first thought be? If you do not identify as LGBTQ, how would you feel if people thought you were LGBTQ? And have you ever been to an LGBTQ social event, march, or worship service, or etc.? Why or why not? And I think it's wonderful that many of us want to just simply support one another. We just need to be mindful with how we react to certain things and how that could potentially impact some of our LGBTQ friends and communities. So, for example, I identify as a straight cisgender woman, and I have gone to support a number of queer spaces. However, I think individuals who identify as such need to be careful of making patrons or individuals within these potentially safe spaces, which they consider, feel different, I guess you can say. So really, I guess like novelizing queer spaces, if that makes sense. So like imagine what it would be like if every time you went to a bar, you know, a regular bar, a straight bar, let's say, because we know there's gay bars, there's Boys Town, etc., that people were commenting on how much they loved straight people and how cute all the straight bars were and heterosexual this, and oh, this is so interesting, like this idea of novelizing. After a while, you might get really annoyed and, you know, offended. You'd be tired of feeling novel. You'd be tired of feeling different or made out to be, you know, to seem to be different, when really you're just trying to relax, socialize, kick back. And more importantly, anti-LGBTQ bias is all around us, yet we tend to overlook the subtle biases like the gay jokes, the exclusion of LGBTQ related themes in curricula, anti-LGBTQ name calling. Subtle or not, bias has the power to hurt and isolate people. And so our work as allies includes first recognizing and challenging our own LGBTQ biases. Talk that talk. Pronouns, of course. Ask me about my pronouns. Pronouns are important. You never want to misgender someone, and we'll talk about that. Using someone's correct pronouns is an important way of affirming someone's identity and is a fundamental step in being an ally. The best way to ensure that you are using the proper terminology when referring to an individual is to find out the terminology they themselves prefer. So language has a huge impact, right, on the way we see others, ourselves, and yet language is constantly changing. So it's important to familiarize yourself and keep up to date with LGBTQ related terms and concepts. There's even names and words and new things that I'm learning every day that I don't even know. So just continue to inform yourself. And so talk that talk continued. Common pronouns include she, her, hers, he, him, his, they, them, theirs. There are other non-binary pronouns, and if you have questions, politely ask the person to give them examples on how to use the pronouns. And while we might typically think of they, them, theirs as a plural pronoun, we actually use this to refer to an individual all the time without realizing. So when we refer to a person whose gender we do not know, we might use this as a pronoun. You know, someone can ask me, where did they go? Like I could be at, I don't know, an office or a meeting. And we, you know, don't even notice that we use they. And my response would probably, I don't know, I think they went to the washroom or they stepped out for a phone call. Make a habit of introducing yourself with pronouns, not just LGBTQ specific situations. This makes sharing pronouns routine, instead of singling out certain people or communities. So, hi, this is just an example. Hi, my name is Serena and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Respectful ways to ask someone their pronouns. What pronouns do you use? May I ask what pronouns you use? When I refer to you, what pronouns should I use? Are you comfortable with sharing your pronouns? To make sure we're not pressuring people to out themselves or disclose something they're uncomfortable with disclosing. And so this slide really established that it's important that we ask everyone what their pronouns are. And it's meant to guide individuals who may have difficulty asking for pronouns or simply do not know how. I do have thoughts. While we want to do our best, going to misgendering. While we want to do our best to use someone's correct pronouns, mistakes can happen. If this does happen, it's best to apologize, say what pronoun you meant to use, and move on without, dwelling on it or dwelling on the mistake. If someone apologizes profusely, it brings attention to an already awkward situation. And then, of course, from that, overly apologizing too much, could potentially put the other person, the person who was misgendered, in an uncomfortable position. So some people in this position might feel pressure to say it's okay, even though it's not okay. Using the wrong pronouns can be traumatic, and it could be potentially, incredibly harmful. If a mistake happens, just apologize, correct yourself, and move on. And then also, going back to this idea of comfort, I want to talk about safety. Keep in mind, some people may use certain pronouns in some contexts and not in others due to a variety of factors. Safety. For example, a person may be openly trans or transgender at work, but not at home with their family. Some people use different names and different pronouns depending on the context and the place that they're in. So it can be helpful to clarify in which situation someone uses certain pronouns. Remember, it's up to each person how and when they choose to share part of their identity with others. And of course, make sharing pronouns a regular part of your space. So at work or, at school, maybe for example, at the start of a work meeting, make it a habit to go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves and their pronouns if they feel comfortable. Maybe someone in the group will emphasize that sharing pronouns is an important part of respecting each person's identity and is part of creating an inclusive space. For example, at my place of employment, we add our pronouns to our emails. And so these are just, small ways we can show that we understand the importance of pronouns. It's a start. Visibility. All right. Research shows that just knowing that there is a supportive ally in a given space can help LGBTQ identified individuals feel safer, especially LGBTQ youth in schools. Attempt to make yourself known as an ally, even if individuals do not come to you directly. Making yourself visible can be a simple task of displaying a sticker. It can also be involved as demonstrating and modeling supportive behaviors. So we have whole safe space materials, whether that be, once again, a little flag in your office, or stickers on your laptop, or stickers for people to take. Display LGBTQ supportive materials, so LGBTQ history or LGBTQ events, where individuals who identify as LGBTQ can receive supportive services or access services. Wear visible markers, so if you are an ally, there's nothing wrong with potentially having a little pride flag on your ID, or a pronouns pin, or a wristband, a bracelet, whatever that marker is. Let others know that you're an ally, by telling someone you stand for this, or you're an ally for this. That really may educate others and inform others, and really you can create other allies. Or also, more importantly, people know who the allies are in the program, and they can send potential clients or friends, etc., to you. Of course, use inclusive language. Make no assumptions. Specifically with make no assumptions, when engaging with people, do not assume their sexual orientation or gender identity. That's what I think of when I think of making assumptions. Don't assume that everyone is heterosexual or fits into your idea of gender roles. Be open to the variety of identities and expressions, in our society, specifically youth. Oftentimes, very frequently, they receive the message that everyone is supposed to be straight, through social constructs, of course. In this case, not making assumptions, we can show our young people that we understand there's no one way a person should be. And then, of course, responding to anti-LGBTQ behavior when it occurs or when you hear about it. Let individuals know that you do not tolerate homophobia or transphobia. It sends a strong message that anti-LGBTQ behavior is not acceptable to you. Just a little break because this is a lot of helpful information. Happy Pride Month. June is Pride Month, so happy Pride Month. All right, responding to anti-LGBTQ behavior. Anti-LGBTQ behavior comes in all shapes and sizes: biased language, homophobic, transphobic slurs, name-calling, harassment, and physical and sexual assault. As an ally, respond to anti-LGBTQ behavior when and if possible. Take action when you can and if you can. Of course, there are definitely situations where your safety is at risk, and individuals, you will know that it's just, of course, kind of like this intuition. Just your safety comes first. That's what matters. So address slurs, name calling, harassment, etc. Name the behavior, describe what you saw, and label that behavior. Of course, this is all in context of when you can do this. So for example, I heard you use the word blank, and that is derogatory and considered homophobic, or is homophobic. That language is unacceptable. Something along these lines when you're calling someone out or addressing, the anti-LGBTQ behavior. And, use or create a teachable moment, support the targeted individual, hold people accountable. Going to, your safety is utmost importance. I just want to emphasize that, and it could be at risk in certain groups or situations. However, if this is not the case, I do also want to acknowledge that no action is an action. If an incident is overlooked or not addressed, it could potentially imply acceptance or approval of that behavior. I do also want to add to use or create a teachable moment. Decide if you're going to educate in the moment or later. So for example, if you're going to address this person or group publicly or privately. If you decide to educate later, you'll need to create a teachable moment. And then you can then take this opportunity to teach one individual, a specific group, depending on the situation and space, about language and behaviors that are acceptable and those are not. And then for support the targeted individual, I just want to make it known that, don't make assumptions about what the individual is experiencing. Once again, depending on the space and situation, you may want to ask the individual if they're okay and if they need anything. You ultimately will have to decide whether to do this in the moment or later, and if it will be publicly or privately addressed. The approach of this will look very different across different settings. For example, schools versus a bar, And then hold people accountable, impose appropriate consequences in situations, and sometimes that's nothing. So this looks very different, like I said, in a bar where someone may have said a very derogatory remark, and you call the person out, you address it, tell them this is wrong, and that's all that may come of it, versus, a young teen in school that's being bullied or harassed, and name calling or bullying was happening, there may be disciplinary action. So, hold these students or, these young people accountable. It's just something to think about. Support and educate. So listen, be a resource, be conscious of your own biases, seek knowledge, inform yourself, create inclusive curriculum, and promote non-discriminatory policies and practices. For listen, in general, people need to feel comfortable expressing themselves. If anyone comes to you about being harassed or being excluded or has concerns for their safety or just about their life in general, I think that we need to keep in mind that you may be the only person they feel safe speaking to. So just be there to listen. It goes back to our previous slide of don't take up space, just listen. And then for be a resource, an effective ally will also know when and how to refer individuals to outside help. So if you don't, none of us have the answers. As long as we have the resources to provide this individual who's coming to you, that's what matters. So just knowing when and how to help individuals. Be conscious of your own biases. What comes to mind? Acknowledge how homophobia, transphobia, and heterosexism may affect your efforts to be an ally to LGBTQ people. And then, what else am I thinking of? So seek knowledge, inform yourself, periodically brush up on LGBTQ related language. I stated that in the previous slide. And even current issues facing the LGBTQ community. For inclusive curriculum, this could be LGBTQ history, examples of diverse families. So maybe like posters of same-sex couples, or celebrating LGBTQ events. And this is a continuation. So being an ally is more than just policy. Many of the difficult parts of being LGBTQ exist outside the legal system. Family rejection, street harassment, internalized shame, demeaning media representations, and countless other social and institutional stressors. As an ally, it's not your job to be the therapist or counselor. This is important. However, it should be your job to listen to the LGBTQ people in your life, ask them how they're doing, to be aware that they may have gone through and might still be going through some things you don't understand, and offer your support when you can. So it goes without saying that there's a tremendous kind of overwhelming amount of work to do until LGBTQ, especially transgender individuals, are treated equally under the law in the United States. And this is incredibly important, and being an ally obviously means contributing to that fight whenever and however possible. I would like to add, just my personal opinion, even huge victories like legalizing same-sex marriage doesn't magically make things better. For example, real things like queer people's feelings of rejection of shame, especially around, I guess, a core part of their identities, can do a lot of damage long-term. So that must be acknowledged. Like experiences such as, what am I trying to say? Like experiences that can really cause great harm to many LGBTQ people, like being pushed away from their friends or kicked out, by their parents or guardians, told that, this is a sin, what you're doing is sinful, you're not normal. These things are of great significance. So keeping your heart open and an eye out for your LGBTQ community and friends and peers after the pride parties have ended, the media cameras are turned off, are sometimes, likely to go a lot further than, small votes or like parade posters, if that makes sense. And I would like to address, how we can uplift and protect Black transgender people and communities. Black trans individuals often face a specific set of structural, institutional, and personal barriers to accessing basic needs like housing, employment, and safety due to the intersections of their identities. According to a 2012 data from Labata Legal, nearly 1 in 2 Black transgender people have been to prison, and Black trans people are also much more likely to face discriminatory policies and threats of sexual assault once behind bars. Moreover, Black transgender individuals are also at higher risk of experiencing homelessness and poor mental health. In 2019 alone, at least 19 Black trans women were killed by fatal violence. Someone in the media right now is Nina Pop. As Black transgender people live at the center of 2 of the most economically and politically disadvantaged groups in this country, they are in need of specific and ongoing support. During this time especially, the fight for collective liberation should include the voices of the most marginalized, particularly Black trans women. And so the solutions are not found by looking to police or prisons, which are institutions that have for a long time decimated Black trans women and the Black trans community overall, but rather to ourselves and to our allies, because our liberation is tied. None of the work matters if people are still being forgotten and left behind. So that's why we're bringing this up in this presentation. So just a little continuation. If you see yourself as an ally or organizer, ask yourself, What relationships have I built with Black trans people and organizations? Am I aware of issues impacting Black trans people? And do I reach out to the folks I know when issues arise? Are there Black trans people that know they can reach out to me if they need safety or support? How am I centering the expertise of Black trans women when it comes to addressing issues of DV, domestic violence, public safety, healing justice, disability justice, reproductive justice, housing justice, and so much more. So it's just something, you know, to be mindful of, or at least inform yourself of. And here are some wonderful resources that you can access as an ally or LGBTQ individual seeking resources. So we have GLAD, we have Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, Transgender Law Center, the Trevor Project, It Gets Better Project, National Center for Transgender Equality. Here in more local things, we have the Transformative Justice Law Project of Illinois, of course, Broadway Youth Center of Howard Brown, the Center on Halstead, Affinity Community Services, and Equality, Illinois. And here are some Black-led organizations that you can donate to, more specifically focus on the transgender community, but some aren't, like Brave Space Alliance, a Black-led, trans-led LGBTQ center, but they serve all LGBTQ individuals. The Okra Project, which is a collective that brings home-cooked, healthy, and culturally specific meals to Black trans people across the country. We have For the Girls, who raise money to assist with Black transgender people's rent and gender-affirming surgeries. It started out in New York, but now it's grown, aiding trans people across the country. And then, of course, Black Trans Protesters Emergency Fund. It was set up with the specific purpose of supporting Black trans protesters with resources such as bail and medical, care. So you can donate. They used to have a website, but it's been so busy that it crashes a lot. So they created a Twitter for it. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.